If you've been working on Seiko movements for any length of time, you know that replacing the Diashock spring can be a real pain. And because of this, oftentimes new watchmakers don't take the shock setting out to clean it because they're worried about reinstalling the spring. Now, when I worked as a watchmaker, I primarily worked on Swiss and American movements. So even though I was fairly proficient in installing the die shock spring, I also had my fair share of problems. Now, while finishing up the hairspring lesson in my watchmaking course, I made a discovery by accident that changed the way I now handle Seiko's Diashock spring. And if you can spend just 6 minutes to watch this video, I think whatever struggles you may be having will be alleviated forever. Now, this little tool that I'm using is called a jewel picker, and there's all kinds of things that you can use it for. It has a small rubber tip that is slightly sticky, yet it leaves no residue behind. I primarily use it for removing a speck of dust off a dial, but you could certainly use it to pick up small parts. But today we're going to use it to handle this Diashock spring. To show you how easy this tool makes the process of replacing the spring, I decided to film this in one take with no edits, and I'm going to do it 3 times so that you can really see this is a foolproof way not only to control the spring and keep it from flying away, but to move the spring without damaging it. The typical ways you see this spring installed is either with 2 pairs of tweezers or a piece of pegwood with the center cut out to push down onto the spring in order to be able to turn it into the groove around the setting. Using 2 pairs of tweezers requires you to push down on both ends of the spring hard enough to be able to dig into the metal in order to get the spring to rotate, and that can result in either the spring flying away or in scratching the spring. The pegwood method works well, but typically it's going to leave behind small bits of the pegwood, which can then work its way into the movement, get attracted to oil, and it contaminates the jewels. Now, after just saying that you can scratch the springs with pushing down on the top of the tweezers, I'm just using a very, very light amount of pressure, and I'm not really pushing down on it. But as you can see, what really makes this work is that the tip of this jewel picker really makes it easy to move this spring around. So now we're going to do it again, and I'm going to kind of walk you through how I do it. And we're going to start by taking the spring out again, which, is pretty straightforward. You just want to use either a couple pair of tweezers, or in this case, I'm just using a tweezer and a probe. And then I'm just going to use the tweezer to remove the spring and put it in my tray. You could certainly use the jewel picker to pick this up and move it over. I do encourage people to develop your tweezer skills because you're going to need to be able to have good tweezer skills as you learn more and more about watch repair. But here we are. I'm just reinstalling the jewel setting back in to the movement. I'm using the jewel picker to pick up the spring. I'm going to move it in, put it in position. Now, what I typically try to do is get one end into the groove to start. And then I'm going to hold down the other end with my tweezer, just lightly pushing it down. And then I'm just going to give it a slight turn. And then I'm going to push it with my tweezer as well. And you can see, that's about as easy as it gets. Now, of course, you could use 2 of these jewel pickers and eliminate the tweezer altogether if you wanted to, but I've only got 1. So and this method works fine. So just to make sure there was no tricks, let's do it one more time. Just give it a light twist. Make sure that you keep either your probe or your tweezer inside the center of the spring. That way it can't go flying off. And I'm just removing the spring, putting it in my tray, pulling out the jewel. Now, of course, you're going to pull it out. You're going to take it apart. You're going to wash it. You're going to re-lubricate the end stone, put it back together, and then here we are. We're just going to drop it into the block. Make sure it's in all the way. Use the jewel picker. And now I'm just moving the spring into position. Guys, I'm telling you, this is, when I discovered this method, I was like, why didn't I think about this before? Just look, guys, it really doesn't get any easier than that. Now, if you want to take your watch repair to a different level, you're interested in a watch repair course, I'll leave a link in the description. And until next time, we'll see you again.